I was born in San Francisco and grew up in the Bay Area. My father and I were watching the first Air Force Academy bowl game, and at halftime they showed a movie about the school, and he said, "Have you ever thought about going to one of the service academies?" And I said, well, if I did, it would certainly be the Air Force Academy because I love airplanes. And so the next day he called our congressman and he asked what would happen. He says, well, it's very late, but have him send me a letter. And the next thing I know, I'm offered an appointment at the Air Force Academy after, in fact, I had accepted Stanford and was going to go to Stanford and be an engineer. And I wanted to get there early, so get started on that very first day. And by the end of the day, I had been told that I was putting a mark by my name because I wouldn't be here in 6 weeks. I was scared to death. It became apparent that there was more than the honor code that would be important for cadet behavior, and we called it professional ethics. And so I was squadron representative to the Professional Ethics Committee. I chaired it during the fall of my senior year. It was a fledgling organization to try and think more broadly than simply than the direct statement of the honor code. There was a very active scholarship board that made decisions about who would apply for what scholarships, and we were encouraged to do that. So academics became a big part, especially the master's program. So I was successful in securing a Fulbright. But the real benefit of the Fulbright was to broaden my horizons, to add to this experience I had in high school as a foreign exchange student, and to do it in Germany. Judy and I met each other on a blind date in my third class year. When it came up graduation, I was going to Europe and she was still in school, finishing up. And the idea of my going to Europe and then coming back to go to pilot training doesn't seem like that was going to be healthy for the relationship. So I asked her to marry me. So our marriage started out not close to family. I mean, we were a team. So I came back, and because I had won a scholarship, I was guaranteed the base that I would have had I picked based on order of merit. So I went to Williams Air Force Base in Arizona. I won the academic award, I won the military award, and I won the flying award. And I was asked if I would be interested in staying as a T-38 instructor at Williams. I had volunteered for Southeast Asia. Finally, I was alerted for an RF-4C. And about that time, I was also promoted to major. So I was assigned to the 11th Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron at Udon, Thailand. I really enjoyed that time. You suddenly realize that you're doing what you've spent all this time learning how to do. When I graduated from the academy, I received the award for the Outstanding Cadet in Economics, and was told at the time, if you ever want to come back and teach, let us know, and if you don't, we'll come find you at some point. So I thought about it, and I said this would be a good time to go to school, to teach at the academy, and then to move on from there. And so the academy was happy to sponsor me. I had been accepted at Stanford Business School. I thought the MBA as a master's degree would be better than a master's in economics. And so that's what I did. There was a member of the faculty at Stanford who had been a White House fellow. And my uncle sent me a brochure, and he just put a note on it. He said, perhaps a program you ought to think about. And so the idea of going to Washington and serving in the Pentagon is what I thought was something I wanted to do. I ended up in the White House working as an executive assistant to the president for international economics. So I had a really great position in which to gain perspective about how policy is made at that level. I was slated to return to the academy to teach, but my exposure in Washington also was known by the people over in the air staff, and they said, no, with this experience, Les Denend ought to come over to the air staff and help us here. So there was a tug of war, and I do remember I ended up in the Vice Chief of Staff's office, who was then General Allen, and he told me, I don't often get involved in assigning majors. Your name has been bounced around here, which may or may not be a good thing, but I wanted to meet you before I made a decision. And the decision was that I ought to go to the Air Force Academy. Going to the Academy to teach is a wonderful tour, and it allowed me to finish my PhD. So I finished the dissertation while on the faculty there. My name had been submitted and for a position on the National Security Council staff. And the person who had put my name in, again, was Randy Jane, who by that time was now in the office of OMB. This was a new office, only 2 people, but trying to implement part of the key policies of President Carter's campaign for president. And it was very interesting to be sitting in these interagency meetings and try and figure out and sort of be the guide as to what would be an acceptable way to respond. I joined the chairman's colonel's staff group. I took intelligence matters, and I had the budget and 1 or 2 other things. I had no experience with the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the joint process, so that was all new. And it was actually fun, very disciplined. I found it easy to adapt to. And then something I could not anticipate happened, but one of my White House Fellows classmates called me and said, I'm drowning over here in the White House. I need somebody who can write and help me. And I said, well, I'm coming up on retirement, and I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna do, so it'd be it could only be a year. He said, I need somebody right now. And generally the Reagan administration had been very, very careful about having any association with people that had served in the Carter administration. When Meese learned that I had flown almost 200 combat missions, then I was an okay person, so I was accepted to go over. So I went over and joined the economic policy staff, and was there up until the point where I retired. So I joined the McKinsey office in Washington, D.C., which at the time was on Pennsylvania Avenue, about half a block from the White House. In almost every client that I served, they tried to recruit me to join the company. So I got a call from a recruiter who was looking for a CEO of a public company. The idea of being a CEO of a public company is really a new experience. I had been in a company, but I had not had that role. So there's nothing like going to your first earnings call and then to talk to investors about the results and what you think, and make sure that you don't promise something that then subsequently is taken as you gave a direction and in fact didn't fulfill it. So it's a very quick learning experience. So I interviewed a bit to take the next step, be CEO of a larger company or a different kind of company. I was on several boards. I was on the USAA board by then, and I thought that I can be a board member and take that as a serious activity, all that I do, and not take another position in a company, and that's what I did. So I embraced the idea of corporate governance. I wanted to be viewed as someone that helped make the company be better as a board member. My kind of return to USAFA started about 2011. The president of the class formed a committee, and he asked me if I would be on the committee to figure out what our gift should be. And we raised, now it's over $1 million, dedicated not to a piece of hardware, but to an idea. And that was curriculum development at the CCLD, funding efforts to continue the oral history at the Academy, and a smaller portion for a program called Class Histories. I knew what the Falcon Foundation did. I had always thought it was kind of a very exclusive, and I was invited to join. And I support that mission of providing scholarships to those who don't get in this year, but are strong candidates for next year. When I got involved in the endowment, and this was following the reunion, and so with the encouragement of Paul Madera, who followed through, I became a founding director of the endowment, and I thought I could help take some of the lessons from private corporate governance and help our board begin to function more like a real corporate board. And this is true, I'm probably speaking for every cadet that ever graduated. When you graduate and you look at a 20-year career, you have no idea. There are some decisions that you make to go to pilot training, to take the first assignment, that have lasting impact that's impossible to foretell, but I have no regrets. I don't think I would have done things differently if I'd had the chance. Obviously, there have been some big moments. The decision to go to the Air Force Academy, or being elected president in the 4th grade, that sort of got me thinking. Having President Kennedy tell me, do anything you want, and then General McDermott saying the same thing. I know personally a lot of the distinguished graduates. I think maybe I'm not unique, but because of the endowment, because a number are my classmates or near classmates, I've always held this group to be really special. I was totally taken by surprise. I had no idea, and when I found out who the other guys were and knowing the ones who are in that group, I felt real humility. I mean, that's the emotion that probably pervades and persists till today. You know, you think, what's the most important thing? Well, it's what you're going to do tomorrow or this project and so on. And gradually, as you get older, the most important thing emerges as family. It's the most enduring thing that you've participated in building or trying to provide guidance. And that's certainly true of me. I've seen a lot of different ways of human interaction in the military and the private sector when people are under stress because the business is failing. And if you can't call upon the values of truth, honesty, integrity, the notion of service, these institutions are really the repository, and institutions like them, I think Stanford, certainly the other service academies, for the values that make our society work, that make us who we are. And so I am a strong believer and a strong supporter of the Air Force Academy.